My name is Jane. I am here to tell you everything that we know so far about the Cuban Missile Crisis, up until the current date of October 20th, 1962. First, a few words about myself. I am married to a wonderful man named Ben. He works for the government as a Secret Service member. I am mother of 3 children. My oldest child is 16 and his name is Jackson. My second child's name is Michael and he's 13. My youngest child's name is Sarah and she's 8. The crisis started because all of the tensions that had grown between Russia's peaceful competition and Kennedy's promise to be tough on Russia, such as the space race, the arms race, nuclear testing, and the American funding of anti-communists in Vietnam and Laos, just to name a few. In 1959, the crisis started. The American people received news that Fidel Castro had taken power in Cuba. This was threatening to us because Cuba is right next to America, and from what we had heard, Fidel Castro was a horrible man. In 1960, Fidel Castro made a trade agreement with Russia in which they sent sugar to Russia in return for oil, machines, and money. This frightened America even more. America stopped trading with Cuba and Russia that year. In retaliation to that, Cuba nationalized all American-owned companies. In April of 1961, the CIA encouraged, funded, and transported an attempt by anti-Castro Cuban exiles, but that was a failed attempt which embarrassed Kennedy. This is a picture of Fidel Castro after he won the Bay of Pigs attack. Later on in that year, in September, Castro asked Russia for weapons to defend them against America, and Russia agreed. In the current year of 1962, in October, on the 14th, an American U-2 spy plane took pictures of a nuclear missile base being built in Cuba. President Kennedy was told he had 10 days before Cuba could fire the missiles at targets in America. We know that Kennedy decided to act. He looked at his options, which were a nuclear missile strike, which would probably cause a nuclear war, a conventional attack, but there were also Russian troops in Cuba and would probably lead to an American versus Russian war, do nothing, but the missiles were too dangerous, or a naval blockade, which would stop the missiles from getting to the bases, and it wasn't a direct act of war. President Kennedy chose the obvious choice of the blockade. We know that later that night, a spy in Russia was arrested, and his last message read, "Soviet attack imminent." That's all we know right now. I'm scared for my children, my husband, and myself. I don't want to lose any of them. They are everything I work for. My husband did us a wonderful favor building us a bomb shelter, even though he would be away protecting President Kennedy. The day is October 23rd, 1962. The only news that we have been told is that Russian Ambassador Khrushchev explained that the missile sites were solely to defend Cuba against the attack of the aggressor. We also know that 20 Russian ships were headed for Cuba. The date today is October 24th, 1962. We were told that America has been accused of piracy by Russia. We were also warned that Russia is getting ready a fitting reply to the aggressor. None of us know what that means other than a possible nuclear war. Today, on October 25th, 1962, the first Russian ship reached the American naval blockade. But it was just an oil ship, so it was allowed through. However, the Americans were told that the Russian missile ships had turned around. My husband returned home to us today and told us that secretly the U.S. government offered to remove the U.S. missiles in Turkey if Cuba would do the same. The time is 11 p.m. on October 26th. It was confirmed that Russia was still building the missile bases in Cuba. Once again, we were told to return to our bomb shelters. President Kennedy started planning a military attack. Earlier this evening, I received a telegram from Ben telling me that Khrushchev sent a telegram to President Kennedy offering to dismantle the sites if Kennedy would lift the blockade and agree not to invade Cuba. I was also told that the Kennedy brothers saw the Russian ambassador and again mentioned removing the missiles in Turkey. I received another telegram from Ben early this morning, saying that before President Kennedy could reply, Khrushchev sent another letter demanding that Kennedy also dismantle the American missiles in Turkey. Also in that telegram, Ben told us that a U-2 spy plane has been shot down over Cuba. From what Ben was telling us, we are frightened that we are about to have a war upon our hands. The time is 7 p.m. on October 27th. Ben sent us another telegram telling us that President Kennedy decided to ignore the plane incident and also disregard Khrushchev's second letter. However, Ben also said that Kennedy did send a reply telegram to Khrushchev stating that he would lift the blockade and agree to not invade Cuba if Khrushchev would dismantle the missile bases. He also secretly offered to dismantle the U.S.'s missile bases in Turkey. October 28th. Khrushchev agreed and the crisis has finished. It is such a relief to know that everything is starting to settle down. This has been a month of fear, but it is now over. Ben is coming home tonight for a while and I'm making his favorite for dinner. There is no more fear. I can sit down and relax and watch my wonderful kids grow up in peace. The date today is November 20th, 1962. Thankfully, the Russian bombers have left Cuba and Kennedy lifted the naval blockade. In a way, we can be thankful for this scare, because there were some pretty good results from it. President Kennedy had gained prestige. However, Khrushchev lost prestige because he had failed. Both sides had had a fright, therefore people will hopefully be more careful in the future. Also, a telephone hotline was set up to directly talk in a crisis. Today starts the new year of 1963. Both America and Cuba have signed to a nuclear test ban treaty.